The Vryn hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their crystalline ships moved through space like floating cities of light. Every species in the known universe bowed before them. The Vryn were not cruel masters, but they were absolute ones. They had technology that made other races look like children playing with sticks. Humanity arrived in this universe 73 years ago. They came in small ships with hopes of friendship. The Vryn looked at these newcomers and saw nothing special. Humans were soft creatures. They had no natural armor. They could not survive in hard radiation. Their lifespans were short. The Vryn gave humanity a simple choice: accept your place or face destruction. So humanity accepted. They took the mining worlds. They grew food on agricultural planets. They built their small colonies in the corners of the galaxy where nobody else wanted to live. The humans worked hard and asked for little. They seemed content with their lot. The Vryn stopped paying attention to them after a few decades. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHSV Indomitable. Her ship was officially listed as a research vessel. It had plain gray walls and simple controls. To anyone looking from outside, it appeared to be just another human cargo ship. This was exactly what humanity wanted the Vryn to think. Sarah was 52 years old. Her hair had gone gray years ago. She had deep lines around her eyes from too many years in space. She had been there when the Vryn first contacted Earth. She remembered the excitement. She also remembered when that excitement turned to disappointment, then fear, then quiet anger. 20 years ago, Sarah lost her daughter. The Vryn came to a human mining station and found the workers trying to organize. They wanted better conditions. The Vryn considered this rebellion. They destroyed the entire station. 4,000 people died. Among them was Maya Chen, age 19. Sarah never forgot. She also never stopped working. She became a ship captain. She studied Vryn technology. She learned everything she could about their weaknesses. And she waited. The call came on a Tuesday morning, station time. New Terra was burning. The colony had 4 million people. They had asked the Galactic Council for fair trade agreements. They wanted to sell their crops at market prices instead of the fixed rates the Vryn demanded. It was a reasonable request. It was also the last request they ever made. The Vryn fleet appeared without warning. 6 warships, each the size of a small moon. They fired once. The planet's shields lasted 3 seconds. Then the atmosphere started burning. By the time Sarah received the distress signal, it was already over. The Indomitable arrived 6 hours later. The crew stood in silence as they watched the planet below. New Terra was a blackened ball of rock. The oceans had boiled away. The cities were glass. There were no survivors. There was nothing left to save. Sarah's communications officer, a young woman named Rita Park, spoke quietly. Her voice shook. She said that her sister lived on New Terra. She said past tense. Lived. Around the bridge, Sarah saw similar faces. Everyone had lost someone, maybe not on New Terra specifically, but somewhere. Some station, some colony, some family member who made the mistake of thinking they deserved basic dignity. The proper procedure was clear. Return to Earth. Report what happened. File an official protest with the Galactic Council. Wait for nothing to change. That was what a good captain would do. Sarah Chen had never been particularly good at following procedures. She turned to her crew. She told them there was another option. They could run, or they could fight. Fighting meant death. It probably meant death for nothing. The Indomitable was 1 ship. The Vryn had 10,000. The math was simple and cruel, but Sarah had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. The Indomitable was not really a research vessel. Hidden beneath the plain exterior were weapons humanity had built in secret. Railguns that could fire metal slugs at nearly light speed. Fusion drives that could outrun most Vryn ships. An artificial intelligence named Archon that could think faster than any organic mind. They had one advantage. The Vryn thought they knew humanity. They thought humans were weak, scared, broken. The Vryn had no idea what desperate people could do. Sarah's executive officer, Commander James Rivera, was a practical man. He asked what one ship could do against an empire. He asked if she was really willing to throw away 147 lives for revenge. Sarah looked at the dead planet below. She thought about her daughter. She thought about 4 million people who died for asking to be treated fairly. Then she answered, "This was not revenge," she said. This was a message. Humanity needed to show the galaxy something. They needed to prove that humans were not slaves. They were not cattle. They were not things to be used and discarded. If the Indomitable died making that statement, then at least they died as free people. She put it to a vote. Every crew member had a choice. They could take the escape pods back to human space, or they could stay and fight. No judgment either way. This was not a military operation. This was something else. Something humanity had never tried before. The vote took 5 minutes. It was unanimous. Every single person chose to stay. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. These people had all volunteered for the Indomitable's crew. They had all known, on some level, what the ship really was. They had all been waiting for this day. She gave the order. Plot a course for the neutral zones. Bring all weapons online. Wake up Archon fully. They had work to do. As the Indomitable turned away from New Terra's corpse, Sarah allowed herself one moment of grief. Then she pushed it down. There would be time for mourning later. Maybe. Probably not. But right now she had a war to start. One human ship against a galactic empire. It was insane. It was impossible. It was also the only thing left to do. The Vryn had ruled for 12,000 years. They were about to learn that empires, no matter how powerful, could fall. Sometimes all it took was one person who refused to bow. Sometimes all it took was 147 people who decided enough was enough. The galaxy was about to change. The Vryn just did not know it yet. The Indomitable traveled through uncharted space for 3 weeks. The neutral zones were areas between claimed territories. No government controlled them. Pirates and refugees lived there. It was the one place the Vryn rarely looked. Sarah spent those weeks reviewing everything they knew about Vryn technology. The crystalline beings coordinated through a psychic network. Every Vryn ship was connected to every other. This made them incredibly efficient in battle. When one ship learned something, all ships knew it instantly. But Sarah had begun to suspect this strength was also a weakness. If all Vryn felt what each other felt, then pain would spread through them like wildfire. Fear would multiply. One panicking Vryn would cause others to panic. The network that made them strong could also break them. Archon agreed. The artificial intelligence had been analyzing Vryn battle patterns for years. It found something interesting. When Vryn ships took unexpected damage, their response time slowed by 0.3 seconds. That was how long it took for the shock to pass through the network and for coordination to resume. 0.3 seconds was not much. But in combat, it could mean everything. The crew worked 16-hour days preparing the ship. Engineers converted cargo bays into weapon mounts. They stripped out everything not essential to combat. Furniture, personal belongings, comfort systems all went out the airlocks. The Indomitable became a weapon with a crew, nothing more. Sarah walked the corridors during night shifts. She saw crew members recording messages home. She did not stop them. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone understood they were probably going to die. But they kept working anyway. Humans were strange that way. Even facing certain death, they could not stop trying. On the 14th day, they encountered something unexpected. A small ship appeared on sensors. It was badly damaged and leaking atmosphere. Sarah ordered the Indomitable to intercept. They brought the ship into the cargo bay and found 3 Keleth inside. The Keleth were a reptilian species. They had scales like emeralds and eyes that saw in multiple spectrums. The Vryn had conquered their homeworld 200 years ago. Since then, the Keleth served as laborers and technicians throughout the hegemony. They were considered loyal subjects. The leader of the 3 called himself Sikthar. He spoke through a translation device in broken but understandable human language. He asked why humans helped them. Sarah said it was the right thing to do. Sikthar made a sound like grinding stones. It was Keleth laughter. He told Sarah that his people watched humans carefully. Everyone watched humans. The entire galaxy wondered when humanity would finally break. When they would stop accepting. When they would fight. Escathar said his people had a saying, "Even the smallest flame can start a great fire." Sarah asked him a direct question. If humans struck at the Vryn, would others join them? Scathar's eyes went dark. He said that depends on whether humans can hurt the Vryn. Show us they can bleed, he said. Show the galaxy the Vryn are not invincible. Then you will have more allies than you can count. Before the Kelith left in a repaired escape pod, Scathar gave Sarah a gift. It was a data crystal containing detailed information about Vryn fleet movements. He explained that his people had been tracking the hegemony fleet for decades. They could not use this information themselves. But maybe humans could. The crystal revealed something important. Once every 5 years, the Vryn held a ceremony called the Grand Alignment. Their entire fleet gathered at Epsilon Crossing, a massive space station. They arranged their ships in perfect formation and renewed their oaths to the High Council. During this time, their attention turned inward. Their guard dropped slightly. It was the closest thing to vulnerability the Vryn ever showed. The next Grand Alignment was in 3 weeks. Sarah called a meeting of senior officers. She laid out the facts. 3,000 Vryn warships would be in one place. Their shields would be lowered for the ceremony. Their attention would be elsewhere. It was the best opportunity humanity would ever get. It was also complete suicide. Commander Rivera pointed out the obvious. Even if they destroyed 100 Vryn ships, it would accomplish nothing. The hegemony had 10,000 vessels. They would hunt down the indomitable and everyone would die for nothing. Sarah shook her head. They were not trying to win a war, she explained. They were trying to change minds. The Vryn controlled the galaxy through fear and myth. Everyone believed they were unbeatable. If one human ship could strike at their sacred ceremony, if 147 people could bloody the nose of an empire, then the myth would crack. Other species would see. They would understand the Vryn could be hurt, and then maybe they would find their own courage. The chief engineer, a woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, asked about the crew. Did they have a right to throw away these lives? Sarah said she would put it to another vote. Anyone who wanted to leave could take an escape pod. She would not think less of them. The vote happened that evening. This time it was not unanimous. 3 people chose to leave. Sarah helped them prepare their escape pods personally. She thanked them for their service. She told them to tell Earth what happened here. Someone needed to remember. The remaining 144 crew members began final preparations. They trained in combat simulations. They studied Vryn ship layouts. They memorized contingency plans and backup contingency plans. Archon worked 24 hours a day calculating approach vectors and firing solutions. Sarah spent her nights alone in her quarters. She recorded a message to Earth. She explained what they were doing and why. She talked about her daughter Maya. She talked about New Terra. She talked about the 400 species living under Vryn rule, all of them waiting for someone to show them rebellion was possible. She ended the message with words she hoped would matter. We are not terrorists, she said. We are not suicidal. We are people who believe that freedom is worth dying for. We are people who refuse to live on our knees. If you remember nothing else about us, remember that we chose this. We chose to stand. The day before they reached Epsilon Crossing, the crew held a ceremony. It was not religious exactly. Humans had 100 different religions and no religions. But they needed to mark this moment somehow. They gathered in the cargo bay, the largest open space on the ship. People told stories. The communications officer spoke about her sister on New Terra. The navigator talked about his father who died in a mining accident when safety equipment failed. The doctor described a plague that swept through a human colony while Vryn ships orbited overhead, watching but not helping. Every person had a story. Every person had a reason. They were not heroes from ancient myths. They were ordinary people pushed too far, and maybe that was what heroes actually were. Sarah stood and spoke last. She told them the truth. Most of them would die. Maybe all of them. But they would die having done something that mattered. They would die having sent a message that would echo through the galaxy for generations. Future humans would look back at this moment and know that their ancestors never gave up, never accepted, never bowed. The crew cheered. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound of people accepting their fate and choosing to face it with dignity. The next morning, The Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Epsilon crossing system. Sensors immediately lit up with contacts. 3,000 Vrin warships hung in perfect geometric patterns around the station. They looked like a crystal forest in space, beautiful and deadly. Sarah sat in the captain's chair and looked at the display. One small human ship faced the might of an empire. It was the most lopsided battle in history. It was also the beginning of something new. She gave the order. All hands to battle stations. Charge weapons. Prepare to engage. The Indomitable turned toward the Vrin fleet and began its approach. The humans were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vrin noticed the Indomitable immediately. How could they not? The ship appeared on sensors like a small insect landing on a table full of giants. The Vrin fleet's automated systems flagged it as an unknown vessel and sent an identification request. Sarah ignored the request. The Indomitable continued its approach. Engines at maximum efficiency. Weapons powered but not yet active. She needed to get closer. Much closer. A second message came through. This time it was not automated. A Vrin commander spoke in their crystalline language. The translation came through flat and emotionless. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself or be destroyed. Sarah opened a channel. She spoke clearly and calmly. This is the UHSV Indomitable of Earth. We are responding to your attack on New Terra. We are here to deliver humanity's answer. There was a pause. Sarah imagined confusion spreading through the Vrin network. A human ship. One human ship. Coming to challenge 3,000 warships. It must be a mistake. Some kind of malfunction. Or perhaps a trick, the Vrin commander responded. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning. Sarah looked at her crew. Every face was calm. Every hand was steady. They had made their choice. Now came the hard part. She gave the order. Fire. The Indomitable's railguns opened up. These were not energy weapons. The Vrin had shields specifically designed to deflect lasers and plasma, but railguns fired solid metal at incredible speeds. The physics were simple. Mass times velocity equals force, and the Indomitable's slugs traveled at 30% the speed of light. The first salvo hit 3 Vrin command carriers. The shields flickered but did nothing. They were not designed for kinetic impacts. The metal slugs punched through crystal hulls like they were paper. The carriers exploded in brilliant flashes of light. For exactly 0.3 seconds, the Vrin fleet froze. Sarah felt a savage satisfaction. Archon had been right. The shock of unexpected damage paralyzed them. 3 seconds was all the Indomitable needed. The human ship dove toward the fleet formation. Its engines burned brighter than any Vrin ship could manage. The Indomitable was small and fast. It darted between the massive crystal vessels like a bird flying through a forest. And everywhere it went, it fired. More Vrin ships died. Destroyers, cruisers, support vessels. The railguns kept firing until the barrels glowed red-hot. Then they fired some more. Sarah watched the kill count climb on her display. 10 ships, 20-30. The Vrin finally reacted. Their formations broke apart as ships tried to bring weapons to bear. But they were packed too tightly for the ceremony. They had to worry about hitting each other. The Indomitable had no such concerns. It only had one target. Everything with a Vrin transponder. Archon guided the ship through the chaos. The artificial intelligence calculated trajectories faster than any organic mind could process. It predicted where Vrin ships would be 3 seconds before they got there. It found gaps in the defensive fire that should not have existed. It turned a suicide charge into something almost like a dance. But the Indomitable could not avoid everything. Vrin energy weapons found their mark. The human ship's shields held for the first dozen hits. Then they started to fail. Hull breaches appeared across 3 decks. 17 crew members died when a plasma bolt cut through the port side. The ship shuddered and kept flying. Sarah's tactical officer called out damage reports. Port engines at 60%. Forward shields gone. Hull integrity dropping. The ship was dying around them. But it was taking so many Vrin ships with it. The kill count passed 50. Then 60. Then 70. Each destroyed Vrin ship sent another wave of shock and fear through their psychic network. Sarah could almost feel it, even though she was not connected. The Vrin were panicking. They had never experienced this before. Not in 12,000 years. Defeat was a concept they understood intellectually but had never felt. Now they felt it. They tasted it, and it terrified them. The Vrin fleet committed everything. 600 warships broke formation and converged on the Indomitable's position. They did not care about the ceremony anymore. They did not care about formation or tactics. They just wanted this human ship dead. Sarah knew they could not win. That had never been the goal, but they could do one more thing. Something the Vryn would never forget. Something the entire galaxy would witness. She ordered Archon to broadcast on all frequencies. Every species in the galaxy monitored certain channels. Trade channels. Emergency channels. Diplomatic channels. The message would reach everyone. Sarah spoke into the microphone. Her voice was steady. She said that humanity had a message for the Vryn hegemony. They had a message for every species watching. 147 humans on one ship had destroyed 89 Vryn warships. They proved the Vryn could bleed. They proved the Vryn could die. She asked a question. How many more ships would it take? How many more humans willing to fight? The Vryn had 10,000 vessels. Humanity had billions of people. Do the math, she said. Do the math and be afraid. The message went out across the galaxy. On 400 worlds, subjugated species heard it. In stations and colonies and secret meeting places, people stopped what they were doing and listened. A human captain was challenging an empire. A human ship was winning against impossible odds. The message changed everything. Not immediately, not obviously, but something shifted in the collective consciousness of the galaxy. A myth died, the myth of Vryn invincibility. And when a myth dies, revolution becomes possible. On the Indomitable, alarms screamed. The ship was falling apart. Main power was failing. Life support was down to backup systems. The crew worked frantically to keep the vessel flying for just a few more minutes. Commander Rivera reported that the fusion core was becoming unstable. They were losing containment. If it breached, the explosion would destroy the ship. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. She had planned for this. She gave her final order. All crew to escape pods immediately. That was not a request. That was a command from their captain. The crew hesitated. Nobody wanted to abandon ship, but Sarah made it clear. They had delivered the message. Now they needed survivors to tell the story. Go, she said. That is an order. The crew began evacuating. They moved quickly but not frantically. They were professionals even at the end. Sarah stayed on the bridge with a skeleton crew of volunteers. Commander Rivera, Dr. Tanaka, and 15 others who refused to leave. Someone had to keep the ship flying long enough for the others to escape. Sarah programmed the final course herself. The Indomitable would not just die. It would take as many Vryn ships with it as possible. She aimed for the Eternal Radiance, the flagship of the Vryn High Council. It was the largest ship in the fleet, and it hung in the center of the formation like a crystal palace. The escape pods launched. 89 of them scattered into space. The Vryn fleet was too focused on the Indomitable to pay attention to small pods. The humans drifted away into the darkness, watching their ship make its final run. Sarah pushed the engines to absolute maximum. The Indomitable accelerated toward the Eternal Radiance. Vryn ships fired everything they had. Energy weapons tore through the human vessel. Compartments exploded. Bulkheads collapsed, but the ship kept going. Commander Rivera held the engine containment together by sheer force of will and skill. Dr. Tanaka kept the navigation systems online when they should have failed. The other volunteers worked their stations even as the bridge filled with smoke and sparks. In the final seconds, Sarah thought about her daughter. She thought about New Terra. She thought about every human who ever suffered under Vryn rule. Then she thought about the future. The future they had just made possible. The Indomitable struck the Eternal Radiance at 40% the speed of light. The impact alone would have been devastating. But the fusion core breached at the moment of collision. For one brief instant, a new star was born in the heart of the Vryn fleet. The explosion consumed everything within 1,000 kilometers. The Eternal Radiance simply ceased to exist. So did the Indomitable. So did 300 Vryn warships that were too close to escape. The blast wave continued outward, damaging hundreds more vessels. In that explosion, the entire Vryn High Council died. 12 leaders who had ruled for centuries. Gone in an instant. The psychic network that connected all Vryn shattered under the weight of so much simultaneous death. Across the galaxy, Vryn felt the loss like a physical blow. The escape pods drifted in the aftermath. Inside them, 89 humans watched the light fade. They had survived. Not all of them. 58 of their friends died on the ship. But 89 lived, and they would remember. The galaxy watched too. The battle had been broadcast on every channel. Everyone saw what happened. One human ship destroyed 400 Vryn vessels. One human captain challenged an empire and made it bleed. The Vryn hegemony would never be the same. The humans would never be the same. The galaxy would never be the same. A tide had turned, and it could not be stopped. The escape pods drifted through the debris field for 3 hours before help arrived. It came from an unexpected source. Keleth ships emerged from hyperspace and began collecting the human survivors. Siskathar himself commanded the rescue fleet. He told the humans they had done the impossible. Now it was time to see what happened next. The Vryn fleet at Epsilon Crossing was in chaos. Their High Council was dead. Their formation was shattered. Ships fled in every direction, some back to their home territories, others to nearby stations. The psychic network struggled to recover from the trauma. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Vryn did not know what to do. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species heard the story. 1 human ship, 3,000 Vryn vessels, 400 destroyed. The numbers seemed impossible, but thousands of witnesses confirmed them. The broadcast showed everything. There was no denying what happened. Reactions varied by species. Some were terrified. If humans could do this, what else were they capable of? Others were inspired. If humans could fight back successfully, maybe they could too. A few stayed neutral, waiting to see how the situation developed. But nobody could ignore it. The Keleth were the first to act. Within a week of the battle, 17 Keleth colonies declared independence from the hegemony. They armed their defense stations and prepared for retaliation. When Vryn ships arrived to reassert control, they found something unexpected. The Keleth were ready. More than that, they were angry. The first battle happened at Keleth Prime, the homeworld. 3 Vryn cruisers faced a ragtag defense fleet of mining ships and converted transports. It should have been a massacre. Instead, the Keleth used tactics they learned from watching the Indomitable's final fight. They were fast. They were unpredictable. They targeted specific systems instead of trying to destroy entire ships, and they won. Other species took notice. The Varth Collective, a group of insectoid miners, stopped sending resources to Vryn worlds. The Menos tribe's nomadic traders began sharing intelligence about Vryn fleet movements with anyone who asked. The Threen, silicon-based life forms who had been conquered 6 centuries ago, started sabotaging Vryn facilities on their worlds. The Vryn tried to respond. They sent fleets to crush the rebellions, but something had changed. Their coordination was off. Their confidence was shaken. Ships that should have fought with perfect synchronization made mistakes. Captains who should have pressed attacks hesitated. The psychological wound from Epsilon Crossing ran deeper than anyone realized. Back on Earth, the reaction was complicated. Humanity learned about the Indomitable's battle from the 3 crew members who had taken escape pods before the attack. Their testimony reached Earth just hours after the galaxy-wide broadcasts began. The response was confusion, then shock, then debate. Some humans called it heroism. Others called it terrorism. The government was terrified of Vryn retaliation. They scrambled to distance themselves from Captain Chen's actions. They issued statements claiming the Indomitable acted without authorization. They offered to help hunt down any other rebel humans. It was a desperate attempt to avoid punishment. But human populations did not listen to their government. In colonies and stations across human space, people celebrated. They held vigils for the fallen crew. They painted the Indomitable's name on walls and ships. They told stories about Captain Chen and her impossible victory. The government could issue all the statements it wanted. The people knew what they believed. The Vryn never attacked Earth. They had bigger problems. Their empire was fragmenting. Subject species were rebelling across dozens of systems. The remaining Vryn fleet was stretched thin trying to maintain control. They had neither the time nor the resources to punish humanity properly. 6 months after the battle, the surviving crew members were found. The Keleth ships brought them to a neutral station in the Threshold sector. The humans had spent those months hiding, recovering, and wondering if they would be hunted forever. Instead, they found themselves famous. Representatives from 40 different species came to meet them. They brought requests for military advice, offers of alliance, and expressions of gratitude. The humans who had expected death or imprisonment found themselves treated like liberators. It was overwhelming. Among the survivors was Lieutenant Rita Park. the communications officer who lost her sister on New Terra. She stood in a conference room filled with aliens and could barely process what was happening. A Keleth elder thanked her for giving his people hope. A Varth worker offered her a crystal that represented honor in their culture. A Threen diplomat said humans had shown the galaxy how to be brave. Rita thought about her sister. She thought about Captain Chen. She thought about the 58 crew members who died on the Indomitable. Then she spoke. She said they did not do this for glory. They did it because someone had to. Because accepting tyranny was worse than dying free. Because silence in the face of evil was itself evil. Her words were recorded and spread throughout the galaxy. They became a rallying cry for the growing resistance movement. Different species, different worlds, but one message. Enough was enough. The Vryn hegemony fought to maintain control for 3 more years. They won some battles. They crushed some rebellions, but they could not win everywhere at once. Their empire, built on fear and myth, crumbled when those things disappeared. Each lost battle made them weaker. Each successful rebellion encouraged others. It was a slow collapse, but it was inevitable. Eventually, the Vryn homeworld itself faced uprising, not from conquered species, but from their own people. Young Vryn who questioned the old ways. Vryn who were tired of endless war to maintain an empire. Vryn who saw the writing on the wall and chose a different path. The hegemony formally dissolved 4 years after the Battle of Epsilon Crossing. The remaining Vryn territories reorganized into smaller, independent states. Some remained isolated. Others sought to join the new galactic community that was forming. It was messy and complicated and sometimes violent, but it was change. In the aftermath, hundreds of species came together to form a new government. They called it the Galactic Coalition. It was not perfect. It had no military. It had limited power, but it was built on cooperation instead of domination. Every member had an equal voice, including humanity. Earth's government, which had tried so hard to distance itself from Captain Chen, now claimed credit for her actions. They said she had been following secret orders all along. They said humanity had always planned to liberate the galaxy. The surviving crew members found this hilarious and infuriating, but they said nothing. History belonged to whoever wrote it down first. One person was still missing. Captain Sarah Chen. Her body was never found in the debris of Epsilon Crossing. Most assumed she died in the explosion with the rest of the bridge crew. Memorials were held. Statues were built. Her name became legend. 8 months after the battle, a damaged escape pod was found drifting at the extreme edge of the Epsilon system. It had been traveling on minimal power, its beacon too weak to detect until a Keleth patrol ship happened to pass nearby. Inside was a single occupant, barely alive, kept in stasis by failing medical systems. It was Sarah Chen. She had not been on the bridge during the final collision. Commander Rivera had knocked her unconscious and put her in an escape pod during the last minutes. He sealed it manually and launched it himself. Sarah was the captain. Someone needed to survive to tell the true story. Rivera made that choice for her. Sarah woke up in a Keleth medical facility. It took her 3 days to fully recover. When she learned what happened while she drifted in space, she did not know how to feel. The Vryn were broken. The galaxy was free, and she had slept through most of it. Escathar visited her personally. He told her that her sacrifice had saved billions of lives, that her courage had changed the course of history, that she was a hero to 400 species. Sarah listened and felt empty. She was not a hero. She was a mother who lost her daughter and a captain who lost her crew. Heroes were supposed to feel triumphant. She just felt tired, but the galaxy did not care about her feelings. They needed a symbol. They needed someone to represent the victory. So Sarah Chen, who wanted nothing more than to disappear, became the face of the new era. Earth recalled her home. There was talk of court-martial, but it never happened. Public opinion would not allow it. Instead, they held a ceremony. They gave her medals. They promoted her to admiral. They asked her to help build humanity's new military fleet. Sarah accepted the promotion. She had no choice, really. But she made them add one condition. Every ship in the new fleet would carry a memorial plaque listing the names of the Indomitable's crew. All 147 of them. The ones who survived and the ones who died. They would be remembered. That was not negotiable. The galaxy changed. It did not become peaceful. It did not become perfect. But it became free. And that was enough. 5 years after the Battle of Epsilon Crossing, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in a shipyard orbiting Mars. Around her, construction crews worked on 50 new vessels. These were not research ships with hidden weapons. These were warships built openly and proudly. Each one carried the name of someone who died on the Indomitable. The flagship was nearly complete. Sarah had insisted on its name personally. The UHSV Indomitable II. It was larger than the original, more powerful, better armored, but it carried the same spirit. The same message. Humans would not bow, would not break, would not accept tyranny. The galaxy had changed in 5 years. The Galactic Coalition now included 312 member species. They met regularly to discuss trade, territory disputes, and mutual defense. It was messy. Arguments were common, but wars were rare. Most species had decided that cooperation was better than conquest. The Vryn still existed, but their territory had shrunk to a handful of systems. Some Vryn states joined the coalition, others remained isolated, clinging to memories of their lost empire. A few became raiders and pirates. Most just tried to find their place in a galaxy that had moved on without them. It was a sad ending for a once great civilization, but it was the ending they earned. Humanity's role in this new galaxy was complex. Some species saw them as liberators and friends. Others were cautious. After all, humans destroyed 400 ships in a single battle. What else might they do if they felt threatened? Human diplomats worked hard to build trust. They shared technology. They offered aid to struggling colonies. They proved that the Indomitable's fight was about freedom, not conquest. But Sarah knew the truth. Peace was fragile. The galaxy was full of species, each with their own goals and histories. New conflicts would arise. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. That was why humanity needed a fleet, not to dominate, not to control, but to protect, to ensure that if someone tried to resurrect the old ways, humans would be ready. She walked through the construction areas, watching engineers install weapon systems and armor plating. These ships were being built with help from other species. The Kelith provided advanced sensor technology. The Varth contributed mining equipment that could double as emergency tools. The Threen shared their knowledge of energy distribution systems. It was a true cooperation. The fleet would belong to humanity, but it would be built by the galaxy. Lieutenant Rita Park found Sarah near the flagship's main engine. Rita was a captain now, assigned to command one of the new destroyers. She still had nightmares about New Terra, about her sister, but she channeled that pain into making sure nothing like that ever happened again. She was good at her job, the best according to her crew. Rita asked Sarah a question. Did she think they did the right thing? Looking back, with everything that happened, was the sacrifice worth it? Sarah took a long time to answer. She said that 58 people died on the Indomitable. That was 58 lives cut short, 58 families destroyed, 58 futures erased. No amount of political change or galactic freedom could bring them back. In that sense, the price was almost unbearable. But then she thought about New Terra's 4 million dead, about the billions living under Vryn rule, about all the species who suffered and died because nobody fought back. The Indomitable's crew chose their fate. They walked into that battle knowing the odds. The people the Vryn killed had no choice at all. So yes, Sarah said, it was worth it. Not because their deaths were acceptable, but because their sacrifice mattered. Because they proved that resistance was possible. Because they showed a galaxy full of oppressed people that they did not have to accept tyranny. That alone made it worth it, Rita nodded. She did not seem entirely satisfied with the answer, but she accepted it. Maybe that was all anyone could do. Accept that the past happened and try to build a better future. The Coalition headquarters was built on a neutral station called Haven. It was designed by multiple species, resulting in a structure that looked strange but somehow worked. The main council chamber could accommodate representatives from every member species, each with their own environmental requirements. It was a marvel of engineering and cooperation. Sarah attended a council session 2 weeks later. The topic was military cooperation. Some species wanted a unified coalition defense force. Others preferred to maintain independent militaries. The debate was heated. Humans argued for the independent approach. They had just escaped one empire. They were not eager to create another. Escathar, now a senior Kelith representative, supported the human position. He pointed out that strength came from diversity. A unified military would be powerful, yes, but it would also be vulnerable to corruption or control by a single faction. Independent fleets that cooperated were harder to corrupt, harder to control, and ultimately stronger, because they could adapt to different situations. The debate lasted 6 hours. In the end, the council voted to maintain independent militaries but establish mutual defense treaties. If one member was attacked, others would help. But each species controlled its own ships and made its own decisions. It was a compromise. Not perfect, but workable. After the session, several representatives approached Sarah. They wanted to talk about the Indomitable, about the battle, about how humanity found the courage to fight. Sarah was tired of these conversations. She had told the story 1,000 times, but she understood why people asked. They needed to know. They needed to believe that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. She told them what she always told them. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite fear. The Indomitable's crew was terrified. They knew they were going to die. But they went anyway because staying silent was worse than dying. Because accepting evil was worse than fighting it, even hopelessly. One of the representatives, a young Threen named Crystallis, asked if Sarah would do it again. Knowing what she knew now, knowing the cost, would she still give that order? Sarah looked at the young being for a long moment. Then she answered honestly, yes, without hesitation. The galaxy was free because 147 people refused to bow. That was a trade she would make every time. The UHSV Indomitable II launched 3 months later. It was a ceremony unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Representatives from 200 species attended. The shipyard was decorated with symbols and flags from across the galaxy. Speeches were made in dozens of languages. It was chaotic and beautiful and overwhelming. Sarah gave the final speech. She stood before a crowd of thousands and spoke simply. She said the first Indomitable proved something important. That tyranny could be fought. That empires could fall. That freedom was worth any price. This new ship, she said, would carry that lesson forward. It would protect the peace they fought so hard to achieve. And it would remind everyone, human and alien alike, that the strong had a duty to protect the weak, not to rule them. To protect them, the crowd cheered. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the attention. She was not a politician. She was a soldier who did what needed doing. But she understood the symbolism. The galaxy needed heroes, needed stories of resistance and victory, so she played her part. For the people who died, for the galaxy they saved, for the future they made possible. The Indomitable II lifted from its dock and began its first flight. 50 escort ships from 20 different species joined it. They flew in formation through human space, then into coalition territory. It was a show of unity, a demonstration that the galaxy had changed fundamentally. Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship and watched the stars pass by. The bridge was different from the original ship, larger, more sophisticated, but it felt the same somehow, like she was home, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Her first officer approached. It was Commander Marcus Webb, a veteran who had lost his entire family to a Vryn raid 15 years ago. He asked for their first orders. Where should they go? What should they do? Sarah smiled. It was a rare expression for her these days. She said they would patrol the border regions, help colonies that needed assistance, show the galaxy that humanity's strength would be used to protect, not conquer. They would be what the Vryn never were. They would be guardians, not masters. The Indomitable II set course for the frontier. Behind it, 49 other human warships prepared to join the effort. Each one was named for a fallen crew member of the original ship. Each one carried a piece of that legacy forward. They would not be the last ships humanity built, but they would always be the first of the new era. The era humanity helped create. Across the galaxy, former subjects of the Vryn hegemony went about their lives. They worked. They loved. They raised children. They built futures. And when they looked up at the stars, they no longer saw the shadow of an empire. They saw possibility. They saw freedom. Sometimes late at night, Sarah would visit the memorial room on the flagship. It was a small chamber near the center of the ship. On the walls were plaques listing every crew member who served on the original Indomitable. Pictures, names, brief descriptions of who they were. Sarah would stand there and remember. Commander Rivera, who saved her life at the cost of his own. Dr. Tanaka, who kept systems running past all reasonable limits. The young ensign who was afraid but stayed anyway. The veteran sergeant who told jokes to keep morale up. All of them. Every single one. She made them a promise. Their sacrifice wouldn't 10 years after the Battle of Epsilon Crossing. The galaxy had settled into its new reality. The Galactic Coalition was now the dominant political force, though it governed through consensus rather than force. Trade flourished between species who had once been strangers or enemies. Scientific cooperation led to advances that benefited everyone. Wars still happened, but they were smaller, localized. And increasingly, other coalition members stepped in to mediate before conflicts escalated. Humanity's fleet had grown to 200 ships, not the largest in the galaxy but among the most respected. Human captains were known for their adaptability and willingness to fight against long odds. Other species learned from human tactics. The idea of asymmetric warfare, of using intelligence and unpredictability to overcome superior force, spread throughout the galaxy. The Vrin's old strategy of overwhelming power was replaced by something more subtle and effective. Admiral Sarah Chen was 62 years old now. Her hair was completely white. She moved a bit slower than before, but her mind remained sharp. She commanded the Coalition Defense Initiative, a voluntary organization that coordinated military responses to threats against member species. It was not a unified military. Each species retained control of their own ships, but when needed, they could work together with devastating efficiency. The initiative was tested 3 years after its formation. A group of Vrin extremists calling themselves the Crystal Restoration attempted to restart their empire. They had gathered a fleet of 300 ships, mostly old hegemony vessels they had kept hidden. They struck at a Kalith colony world, killing thousands in a surprise attack. The Coalition's response was immediate. Within 6 hours, ships from 40 species arrived at the colony. The human contingent was led by Captain Rita Park and her destroyer, the UHSV Defiant. The Kelith brought their entire home fleet. The Varth sent mining ships converted for combat. Even some peaceful Threen colonies sent support vessels. The Crystal Restoration expected to fight Kelith ships alone. Instead, they faced a combined force of 800 vessels representing the entire galaxy. The battle was brief. The extremists were offered one chance to surrender. When they refused, the Coalition fleet disabled their ships with minimal casualties. The extremist leaders were captured and tried for war crimes. It sent a clear message. The galaxy would not return to the old ways. Sarah watched that battle from the bridge of the Indomitable II. She did not need to give many orders. The Coalition forces worked together naturally after years of joint training and exercises. Each species contributed its strengths. Kelith sensors detected the enemy first. Varth ships blocked escape routes. Threen vessels jammed communications. Human ships led the final assault. It was beautiful in a way. Not the violence, but the cooperation. 300 species working as one. After the battle, Sarah received a message from an unexpected source. It came from a Vrin leader named Crystal Song at Dawn. He was one of the younger Vrin who had grown up after the fall of the hegemony. He thanked Sarah for stopping the extremists. He said that his generation wanted to move forward, not backward. They wanted to be part of the galaxy, not its masters. He asked if humans could forgive the Vrin for their past crimes. Sarah thought about that question for a long time before responding. Could she forgive the species that killed her daughter? That destroyed New Terra? That ruled through fear and violence for 12,000 years? It was not an easy question. Forgiveness was complicated when the wounds ran so deep. She wrote back honestly. She said she could not speak for all humanity. She could only speak for herself. And the truth was that she would never forget what the Vrin did. Never stop mourning the lives they took. But she also understood that Crystal Song at Dawn and his generation were not responsible for those crimes. They inherited a terrible legacy, but they did not create it. Forgiveness might not be possible, Sarah wrote, but coexistence was. If the young Vrin wanted to build something better, humans would help. Not because they forgot the past, but because they believed in the possibility of a better future. That was what the Indomitable fought for. Not revenge, not domination, but the chance for everyone to choose a different path. The message became public. It sparked debates across the galaxy. Some said Sarah was too forgiving. Others said she was not forgiving enough. But most understood what she meant. The past mattered, but it could not be changed. All anyone could do was try to make the present better. On the 20th anniversary of the Battle of Epsilon Crossing, a massive memorial was unveiled at Haven Station. It was designed by artists from 50 different species. The centerpiece was a sculpture of the original Indomitable, rendered in crystal and metal. Around it were plaques listing the names of all who died in the battle, as well as those who died fighting for freedom in the years that followed. The dedication ceremony was attended by thousands. Survivors from the original crew were there, older now but still proud. Families of the fallen came to honor their loved ones. Representatives from every coalition species attended to pay their respects. It was the largest gathering in galactic history. Sarah was asked to give the keynote speech. She stood before the memorial and looked at the names carved into the wall. Commander Rivera, Dr. Tanaka, Lieutenant Park's sister, her own daughter Maya, who died years before the Indomitable's final battle but whose death set everything in motion. So many names, so many lives cut short. She spoke softly, but her voice carried through the sound system. She said that memorials were important. They helped people remember. But the best memorial was not a statue or a plaque. The best memorial was the galaxy they had built. A galaxy where hundreds of species lived as equals, where cooperation replaced domination, where freedom was not just a word but a reality. The crew of the Indomitable did not die to be remembered, Sarah said. They died so that others could live freely. Every child born on a world no longer controlled by tyrants was their true memorial. Every species that chose its own destiny was their legacy. Every person who stood up against injustice was continuing their work. She ended with a challenge. She told the crowd that the galaxy would always face threats. New empires would rise. New tyrants would seek power. But now everyone knew the truth. Resistance was possible. Victory was possible. One ship proved that at Epsilon Crossing. Imagine what millions of ships could do. Imagine what billions of people could do if they stood together. The crowd stood in silence after she finished. Then someone started applauding. It spread through the gathering until thousands were cheering. Sarah stepped back from the podium and looked at the memorial. She touched the wall where her daughter's name was carved. Then she touched the section listing the Indomitable's crew. "We did it," she whispered. "We proved we belong here. We proved that freedom matters more than life. We changed everything." Later that evening, Sarah stood alone on an observation deck of the Indomitable II. The ship was docked at Haven Station for the ceremony. Through the windows, she could see ships from dozens of species coming and going. Trade vessels, passenger liners, scientific expeditions, military patrols. All of them moving freely through space that had once been controlled absolutely by the Vrin. Captain Rita Park joined her. Rita commanded her own cruiser now, the UHSV Liberty. She had grown into a fine officer, strong, compassionate, willing to make hard choices but always questioning whether those choices were right. Sarah was proud of her. Rita asked Sarah what she thought about when she looked at the stars now. Sarah smiled. She said she used to see danger everywhere, threats, enemies, battles waiting to happen. But now she saw possibility. She saw a galaxy full of different people trying to make better lives. She saw cooperation where there used to be conquest. She saw hope. That did not mean the danger was gone, Sarah added. It never would be. But now they were ready for it. Now they had allies. Now they had proof that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people said no. Rita nodded. She asked one more question. What would Sarah do now? She had accomplished everything. Freed the galaxy, built a fleet, established a defense initiative. What was left? Sarah laughed. It was a genuine laugh, something rare for her. She said there was always more work to do, always new threats, always new problems. But she was getting old. Eventually, someone else would need to take over. Someone from the generation that grew up in this free galaxy. Someone who understood both the cost of freedom and the necessity of protecting it. She looked at Rita meaningfully. Rita understood immediately. She protested. She was not ready. She was too young. She did not have Sarah's experience or wisdom. Sarah shook her head. Nobody was ever ready for leadership. Nobody ever felt worthy. But leadership was not about being perfect. It was about caring enough to try, and Rita cared. That was what mattered. The conversation ended when alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Sarah and Rita rushed to the command center. The displays showed an emergency situation at the edge of Koa,